What does it say when one of the world's leading scholars of the Holocaust believes Israel's assault on Gaza is undoubtedly a genocide? And what if I told you this professor and scholar is himself a citizen of Israel and once served in the Israeli army? His name is Dr. Omer Bartov. He's the Samuel Pisar Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University and an author of numerous books on genocide. Next up on the InnerView, we'll talk about the indoctrination Bartov sees happening in Israel, the dehumanization and slaughter of Palestinians, and the near total destruction of Gaza. And I'll ask Bartov why he believes Israel has committed the ultimate crime while the world has watched on. Omer Bartov joins us now on the InnerView. Sir, it's a great pleasure having you on the program. Your piece in The Guardian was extremely powerful. I read that twice. Friends, colleagues read that. They were profoundly moved by it, and I think we'll put a link to it in the YouTube description when this goes up. Thanks so much. I know this is a difficult time for you, and what I want to do is I want to sort of disentangle the part of you being Jewish and Israeli for the first part of this interview. We'll circle back to that. I want to begin by asking you what you thought of what Joe Biden said in one of his exit interviews when relaying the conversation he had with Benjamin Netanyahu very soon after October the 7th, when he went to Israel and he went to visit, and he said, I told him, Bibi, you can't just carpet bomb civilians. And he said back to me, well, you did it in Berlin. You carpet bombed civilians in Berlin. You dropped a nuclear weapon. This is what Biden's relaying. This is what he's saying Netanyahu told him. And yet still after that, to the tune of billions of dollars, there was the military and economic support to Israel and diplomatic cover. Tell me your thoughts on that and how that ties into your broader thoughts on what's going on.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me and for your kind words about the Guardian article. Look, I mean, I think that at the beginning of the Israeli response to the Hamas attack of October 7th, Biden seems to have had the sort of right instincts. He went to Israel in an attempt to bear hug Netanyahu so as to then have more credibility with the Israeli public and to put pressure on Netanyahu to carry out a military operation that was inevitable, that would not be what it became. But what he didn't do is to actually enforce his own recommendations. And Netanyahu and the people around him very quickly understood that they could actually get away with whatever they wanted to with massive American military support and crucial American diplomatic support. As for this comparison with American policies in World War II, there are many things to be said about it, but the most important, I would say, is the following. The U.S. did and Britain as well, of course, did bomb open cities in Germany, killed about 600,000 German civilians intentionally, bombing civilians, hoping to put pressure on the Nazi regime in World War II. And they did the same, of course, not only with atom bombs, but with conventional weapons also in Japan. But the huge difference is that once the U.S. won the war against Germany, of course, with its allies, especially the Soviet Union, and against Japan, what it did was not simply occupy those countries, but to actually begin programs that ensured that those countries could be rebuilt as democracies. The Marshall Plan was the most important post-war program. And Israel, of course, has nothing of that in mind. Israel is doing what it is doing to keep the Palestinians down. And so however we look at this comparison, and when you talk about whether these are war crimes or genocidal crimes, you have to remember what the ultimate goal is. The United States had no intention of occupying and destroying Germany, but of removing the Nazi regime and then rebuilding a democratic Germany, which is what it did.
Can you give me the simplest reason why you believe, as a genocide scholar, what has happened in Gaza over the past more than 1 year, year and a quarter, has been genocide?
Yeah, so as I said multiple times and also wrote in the Guardian piece and have spoken about it even more since the most recent Israeli incursion into northern Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza, is that when you look at the pattern of what Israel has done, and I started seeing this pattern in May when Israel invaded Rafah. When you look at the pattern, you see a combination of factors. You see Israeli military and political leaders talking about destroying Gaza, flattening it, speaking about Palestinians as human animals, saying that there are no uninvolved people. That is, that the campaign is not simply against Hamas, but against the entire population. So these are statements, expressions of intent. Which is important when you try to identify genocide. And secondly, that it turned out that these statements were not only made in the heat of the moment, as they said in Israel when the blood was boiling, but rather were implemented. And you can see systematic destruction of universities, schools, mosques, museums, hospitals, and of course, housing and infrastructure, making it not only impossible for people to live in the Gaza Strip, making it basically uninhabitable, but also making it impossible for the population to revive its own cultural and educational life, killing vast numbers of academics and so forth. And that means that the intention is to destroy the group as such, and that intention has been implemented over time.
As a scholar of the Holocaust, one of the most egregious crimes in modern history, industrial extermination of a people, tell me about the use and misuse of the Holocaust in supporting what Israel is doing now.
So this is a very complicated issue. The laws that we are talking about, the international legal regime that was put into place after 1945, the Nuremberg Tribunal that was based on the notion of crimes against humanity, then the Genocide Convention that was agreed upon by the UN in 1948, the Geneva Conventions of 1949, all of those were in response in large part to Nazi crimes and particularly to the Holocaust. And so we have to understand that the Holocaust played an important role in trying to have a series of laws that would prevent such events from happening again, the famous never again syndrome, as I've called it. Now, one problem with the Genocide Convention is that people, when they think about genocide, they think, well, what we are seeing now the same as the Holocaust? And of course, the Genocide Convention does not say that one cannot carry out the Holocaust again. It speaks about genocide, and it defines genocide in a particular way. And the Holocaust was a genocide, but of a particular nature. There have been many other genocides. There were many before and many others that were different. And obviously what we see in Gaza today is not the same as the Holocaust. There is no Auschwitz, there are no killing pits, there's no Babi Yar, but there is an intentional, an intent implemented to destroy a group as such. Now, in Israel and in many other places outside of Israel, it has been argued that the Hamas attack on Israel was genocidal, was the largest killing of Jews since the Holocaust, and therefore that Israel has the right to do whatever it takes to prevent that from happening again. So this is a kind of turning of the tables. It's not that we are doing genocide, it's that it's being done to us. And this is in many ways at the core of the discussion today. I would simply say that while one can and should condemn the nature of the Hamas attack, the killing of hundreds and hundreds of civilians, taking of hundreds of hostages, that these are war crimes and crimes against humanity, that does not give Israel the right to carry out the kind of attack that it has been carrying out with almost complete impunity since October, now well over a year, of course. And that even if a country has a right of self-defense, which it does, and even if we see that attack as on Gaza as a measure of self-defense, it does not give it the right to carry out war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocidal actions.
So in your Guardian piece, you speak about the incident at Ben Gurion Negev University when you were due to speak, and there was some resistance to that. You speak about some of the trouble you've had as somebody speaking out at a time of this kind of mass collective trauma where nobody wants to even, or very few people want to even consider the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the killing of civilians, the killing of children. You speak about as a young man when you wrote to Yitzhak Rabin about the policy of breaking the bones of Palestinians during the first Intifada, and he wrote back to you, how dare you sort of make any comparison to the Nazis, right? And so there's this reflex, they're the Nazis, we're not the Nazis, how dare you? Tell me how much that feeds into the sort of collective psyche right now and how much Israeli society has changed.
Israeli society has been changing over time. You know, in the early decades of Israel, the Holocaust is actually not an event that the state wanted to speak about too much because it was seen as a humiliating episode in Jewish history under the misleading title of Jews having walked like sheep to the slaughter. And it was only in the 1980s that the Holocaust came to play a different role in Israeli national identity, very much under the right wing, under Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and later on under Benjamin Netanyahu, as a kind of engine of solidarity for Israelis, that we are always on the verge of another Holocaust. Any threat to us is an existential threat. And that united different parts of Israeli society, the young and the old, people from the Middle East and North Africa with people of European origin, religious and secular sectors in Israel. We are all, in that sense, potential victims of a genocide. And because there is no danger of genocide from Europe, it is the Palestinians, it is the Arabs who are threatening us. Now, October 7th was, of course, a tremendous shock to Israeli society on multiple levels, not only the fact that so many people were killed, but also that Hamas took over parts of Israel, that the IDF was unable to respond and protect populations, that the government was so entirely incompetent. And it did bring up echoes of the Holocaust because people for generations have internalized this sort of sense that they are always on the verge of another genocide. And I think that this has been used by the Israeli government and by other factors on the right, not only to justify the actions against Gaza and to create this kind of total indifference in Israeli society to what is happening in Gaza, indifference even among those who oppose the government, who want the war to stop, who want this deal that hopefully will now materialize of exchange. But nobody really cares about what is happening in Gaza itself. And that is what I found most striking, because when I was in Israel in June, people wouldn't even talk about what's going on in Gaza. When I was there more recently in December, people had a better idea of what's going on there, but it didn't seem to actually matter to them a great deal.
I interviewed Ehud Olmert in Tel Aviv, and he's no friend of Netanyahu, and he calls Ben Gvir and Smotrich very colorful names. But even he said, well, after October 7th, Hamas basically said to us, it's us or them, so it's us. And so it's interesting, this idea of this absolutist, it's us at seemingly all costs. Now, even if the ceasefire holds, do you have any optimism for how things might turn out?
Look, I'm not optimistic, of course not. But I want to say, perhaps, and I've said it now for quite a while, this has been a tragedy for both sides. It is a result of the multiple Netanyahu administrations' attempts to say that they can manage the conflict rather than resolve it. And it turned out that the conflict cannot be managed. We can't even call it really a conflict. This massive, ongoing, brutal occupation cannot be managed. That there has to be another way. And Israel has shown now, over months and months of bombing, systematically killing tens of thousands of people, that it still, with force, cannot resolve the issue. So it's not a matter only of whether the ceasefire will hold or not. It is a matter of whether people in Israel, potential Israeli leaders, Palestinian leaders, and especially the international community, will reach the conclusion that the only way to stop this ongoing violence, that will not, as you indicate, will not go away. A ceasefire can hold for a while and then things will break down again. That the only way is to find some kind of solution which will enable 7 million Jews who live there and 7 million Palestinians who live between the river and the sea to share that space in whatever arrangement they can agree on. But the bombs and killing, fences and tanks and artillery cannot resolve this issue.
Why is it important to call war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, if nothing is going to be done about it? If those who have been the perpetrators of it don't face any justice?
Well, this is one of the other dire consequences of what has happened since October 7th. That is that the state of Israel has been able to act with impunity, even as the United States was applying very different standards, say, to what is happening in Myanmar, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Israel has been allowed to get away with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and in my opinion, genocide. I'm not the only one who is saying that, of course. Right. That will mean that the entire international humanitarian legal order that was put into place, as I said, in 1945, is in severe jeopardy. Because there's no reason why other rogue states would not say now, well, Israel could do it, why not us? So in many ways, it is crucial not only to reach a ceasefire, not only to find, of course, some kind of peaceful resolution to this crisis, but also to bring those who are guilty of these crimes to justice. If this is not done, then the sense of impunity will filter around the world, and it will be very hard to make a case that one can go after one state and not another. This is a major danger that I think many people around the world, including many people involved in civil rights and international law, are deeply worried about.
And how much has Western guilt, we can take the example of the Germans, the Americans, sort of late to the party in a way, how much has Western guilt provided cover for what has happened?
Yeah, so it's very different because Western guilt, if you talk about Germany, and Western guilt, if you talk about America, are two different things. We talked about the Americans in World War II bombing the Germans to remove the Nazis. The Germans spent decades finally coming to terms with the fact that they had carried out a genocide of the Jews, and part of German national identity, as former Chancellor Angela Merkel said, that Israel is Germany's Staatsräson. It is its reason for existence, that Germany must defend Israel. And that, of course, has now skewed German policy vis-a-vis Israel to support the unsupportable. The United States is in a much stronger position to actually change Israeli policies. And it does not have this sense of historical guilt. The United States fought the Germans. The main reason, of course, was not to stop the Holocaust, but the result was to stop the Holocaust. The United States is now guilty, is complicit more than any other country in the world. And the Biden administration, unfortunately, is complicit in allowing this to happen, knowing that it could stop it. In November or December 2023, President Biden could have said to Netanyahu, you have to stop it. Otherwise, you're not getting our support. And it would have stopped. And he did not do it. And Germany, France, Britain, in many ways followed suit. Had the United States changed its policies, I think European policies would also have taken a different turn.
And you talk about World War II after the Americans had liberated the Jews from the concentration camps. There was a very powerful image I remember seeing when I was in high school and we were studying World War II. It's that image of the Nazi soldiers being shown the images of what they had done, and images of people in the concentration camps, people who had been exterminated, people who had just survived. You write and you speak about a lot of Israelis having their sort of eyes glazed over when you want to mention the suffering in Gaza. As an Israeli, as a Jew, as someone with family still there, do you think there'll be that moment of reckoning when Israelis get to truly see the extent to which their support of the government has caused devastation and suffering?
You know, after World War II, it was President Truman and General Eisenhower at the time who insisted that German civilians who were living next to concentration camps, go and see those camps that they'd been living next to for years. Did it make an immediate impact on Germans? Well, of course, it took a long time and people still averted their eyes. But in the long run, it changed German mentality in multiple ways. I actually experienced that over years of working in Germany. Will this happen in Israel? I think that the stain of what has occurred in Gaza will not go away. This will be a stain for Israel, for Zionism, for the Jewish state, for decades and decades to come. Will Israelis be able to face up to it in the long run? I think they might, but I think only if there is a political process. And then people will be able to also look back and say to themselves, look what happened when we became accomplices of such a government, of such political movements. If not, I don't think so, because I think the denial, despite the facts, the known facts, will be similar to what you see in Israel vis-a-vis the Nakba, vis-a-vis the expulsion of the Palestinians in 1948. Initially, it was denied in Israel. People said, no, it didn't happen, or people left because they were promised that they would come back with victorious Arab armies and so forth. And after people could no longer deny it, people said, well, it was the best policy, and maybe we should have finished the job. And so it depends on the circumstances, I think. If the circumstances change, if there's a political compromise, then Israelis will be able to look back on Gaza and, in fact, also 1948, and at least express regret and sorrow for what's done in their name and by their own people.
Do you sometimes wonder if there will be an Israel or a Zionism when your grandchildren grow up, given what's going on?
Look, I mean, I think there'll be in Israel, countries don't vanish very quickly from the scene. I think Israel is still a strong country and will continue. As for Zionism, look, I mean, part of what I've been thinking, not least in the last, since October 7th, is that Zionism had accomplished its goal in 1948. It created the Jewish state with fire and sword. But instead of Israel having a constitution and becoming a country of all its citizens, it did not pass a constitution, and Zionism became a state ideology. And as a state ideology, it became increasingly exclusionary, violent, oppressive, and expansionist. And in that sense, if the state is to continue as a state that people want to live in, as a state that can present itself as a democratic, liberal state, it has to change its own sense of itself. It has to put Zionism as a state ideology in the archives and create itself as a modern state that provides justice and dignity for all its citizens.
Professor Omer Bartov, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Take care.